If I asked you, what is church for, what would you say, I wonder? I think if we asked this question to a whole lot of Christians, we'd get a whole lot of different answers. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at what the Bible says church is for. Before I do that, I need to say that in English, church has many different meanings. I wonder if that's the case in other languages. It probably is. But when the word church first came into English, it meant house of worship, a building where Christians meet. So like this was our old church in Twizel. You can see how warm it got there sometimes. That's all ice on those things. Or here's a church we saw in India, in Chennai, when we visited earlier this year. But the same word can also, we all know that the church isn't a building, it's a people. And so the same word can mean a Sunday meeting like this one, or the one there in India. It can mean a local congregation of people like you folk. It can also mean a denomination like the Catholics or the Anglicans or whatever. It can mean Christian religion as a whole, like when we talk about the separation between church and state. Church means all Christian religion. And finally, we also use the word church to refer to the entire body of believers throughout all the ages. When the word church appears in our English Bibles, it's always referring to either a local congregation, group of Christians, or to the body of all believers. I don't think they actually had church buildings back then. People would meet in people's houses. So back to the what is church for question. Church isn't some vain human attempt to get in touch with God or to gain favour with him, though sadly that's how some churches act. There's nothing that we can do to satisfy God, and there's nothing we can do to earn his acceptance or his blessing. And we certainly don't need human priests to connect us to God. You know, we have our great high priest who does that. So God's amazing purpose for the church isn't just to save individuals like you and me through the work of Jesus on the cross. Rather, it's to gather a great congregation of people for himself. And when we stand forgiven before God through the work of Christ, we don't stand alone. We stand in a vast company of forgiven sinners. We see a picture of this in Revelation chapter 7. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." Back in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus, God gathered his people, the Israelites, at Mount Sinai, and that was like a forerunner of the church to come. But it was a scary gathering, and the people trembled before him and were filled with fear. But now he promises to gather us all around him in the city of the living God. And I hope you see yourself there in this grand heavenly church. If you're a Christian, you already have a place there, and you're one of the assembly of the firstborn that's spoken of here. We're already part of this assembly in a spiritual sense, but there will come a time when this spiritual reality will be visible for all to see. So again, the question, what is church for? We're always looking for purpose in things, aren't we? And this is especially true of Christians because we believe that God created the world purposefully. It's not just a random cosmic accident. For some things, their purpose is obvious. Take a hammer, for example. We owned a hardware store in Twizel, so I like hammers. Hammers have a clear purpose. You use them to hit things and sometimes pull things out as well. Now, God created everything, including us, to fulfill his good purposes. So if we ask, what is the church for? We're really asking, what is God's purpose for the church? But what if the church is the end goal? It's not an instrument by which we make something else. What if the church is more like a diamond than a hammer? A diamond exists for the pleasure and the glory of its owner, rather than as a tool for making other things. And you'll have seen in that reading that Ali read in Matthew 16, Jesus said, and I tell you, you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell, which is euphemism for death, will not stand against it. Jesus didn't ever talk about building anything else. The church is it. The church isn't a human organisation. It's not built by the cleverness of man. I will build my church, is what Jesus said, and he meant it. God's majestic purpose in Christ is to save and redeem and gather around himself a people from every nation. In other words, to build his church. So the purpose of the church is to be built. So where do we go from here? Well, there's a lot that could be said about the importance of being part of a local church, but I think you already know that. And anyway, I work for a mission organisation, so where does mission fit in with this? Well, even though the church is God's end goal, it's also the means by which this goal is achieved. And it's still a bit like a diamond, because after all, diamonds get used for things like cutting glass or polishing things. So God could easily have built his church in a different way. He could have called people directly, like he did when he spoke to Adam after the fall. He could send angels to call people into his church. He could use dreams and visions, and he sometimes does. But nearly always, the means by which God builds his church here on earth is through the everyday work of the members of the church as they live out their faith and tell others what God has done for them. How do we know this? Well, first we have what's known as the Great Commission in Matthew 28. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." And there are similar instructions. Each of the Gospels records this, and so does Acts. This was given to the apostles that Jesus had appointed. And those apostles, remarkable as they weren't going to be able to make disciples of all nations during their lifetimes. So it's clear that this instruction applies to all Christians to the very end of the age. And mission is very much modelled by Paul and the other apostles in the book of Acts. And in his letters, Paul praises the churches he writes to for their own mission work and encourages them to keep proclaiming the gospel of peace. Peter tells his readers to always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you the reason for the hope that you have. And the other thing that Paul modelled was prayer for the churches that he loved, including prayer for their missionary activity and outreach. So whether we're the ones being sent or the ones doing the sending, all who belong to Christ's church have a part to play in taking the gospel to those around us and to every nation, tribe and people, because one day we will stand together with them before the throne of the Lamb. And so we're going to tell you a bit about one lady from New Zealand who did just that in India. And actually I'll start by telling you a little bit about India itself. While Ali comes up. India is a huge country. You can see New Zealand there superimposed on it. India is like 12 times the size of New Zealand. But the thing that's really hard to grasp is the population. The population is 300 times the population of New Zealand. India is now the largest country in New Zealand, country in the world, population-wise, with 1.4 billion people. CMCT operates in Chennai, where that arrow is, which is the fourth largest city in India. It's got about 10 million people in it. India is a very religious country. There's very few atheists there. The majority of people are Hindus, and about 80%, but there are other religions as well, including Islam and Christianity. Hinduism used to be a very sort of tolerant religion, but it's become less and less so, and there's a lot of opposition now to other religions. And in fact, the Indian government has made it very difficult for other overseas organisations to operate there now. Don't worry about the details on this, but for an international organisation to operate in India, they need this special licence called an FCRA, and it's a way of controlling who can actually work there. And the government has now taken away more than half of the FCRA licences that people had, and a lot of big organisations like Tier Fund and World Vision have had to pull out of India. They can't operate there anymore. And one of the main reasons they have is religious conversions. So they really, the Indian constitution states that there is freedom of religion, but what they object to is any sort of attempts to convert people away from Hinduism to other religions. And there's actually a lot of persecution of Christians in India now, including a lot of violence, which the officials will turn a blind eye to. And it means that on this World Watch List, which is put out by Open Doors, that ranks countries in order of difficulty of being a Christian, North Korea is at the top. India's at number 11, so it's on a par with Afghanistan and Iran, Saudi Arabia, places like that. It does vary a bit from state to state. It's less intense in the south, which is where CMCT is based, which is good. But they still have to be incredibly careful, especially with anything that would be seen as evangelism. But it doesn't stop them, they just have to watch themselves. India is also known for its poverty. There are less people living in these sort of conditions now than when Colleen first went out there, but it's still a land with a lot of contrast and a lot of poverty.
That was a good spot standing there by the heater. And there's one here as well, which is very thoughtful of you. I just have to say, we aren't straight from Twizel. I don't want you to think we've just, arrived on a plane. We actually moved up to not quite so far away, just south of Pukekohe, at the beginning of the year, or at the end of January, actually. So, but we certainly remember those cold winters, but it's a different sort of cold. It's crisp and dry. Anyway, thank you very, very much for having us this morning, for your warm welcome. Just out of interest, who has heard of CMCT here? Just put your hand up. Not quite everybody. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about CMCT. It stands for Christian Missions Charitable Trust. And the job that who knows Peter and Karen? A few of you know Peter, yeah. So anyone who knows CMCT probably knows them, because for the last 10 years they have been doing the job which we have recently taken over, which is to be the New Zealand ambassadors for CMCT in New Zealand. Our job is to visit churches like you guys and to raise awareness and support, and just to generally encourage you that there are really good things happening in India. It's just amazing the work that's being done there. And you can see us there with Peter Brooks between us. That was at the end of our very first chapel service, where they warmly introduced us. You see, you didn't give us any flowers, did you? It was a pretty amazing welcome that they gave us, very humbling. But just skipping back about 61 years, way back in 1939, a young girl was born in Wanganui. She was the first she must be the older girl there, because she was the first of 4 children. And she was born into a believing family, a Brethren family, and quite a big part of her childhood was going to Girls' Rally. Do you know what Girls' Rally is? It's like a girls' club, a club for girls run by the Brethren Church. And she put her faith in Jesus as a 13-year-old, largely through learning from her church and from her Girls' Rally. And the following year at an Easter camp, she was very impacted by a missionary speaker who was speaking from the front wearing a beautiful sari. She was on furlough from India, and she asked the question, if the Lord called you to serve on the mission field, would you be willing? And young Colleen said in her heart, yes. So, skipping on 12 years, after she'd left school, she taught kindy for about 3 years, and then she did 2 years of Bible college in Auckland, and this is when she attended this very chapel. So there's another part to your history. I wonder if she's mentioned in your book. And as a 25-year-old, Colleen sailed to India in 1964 on a ship. She adopted Proverbs 29:18 as her motto: where there is no vision, the people perish. So in those days, you didn't just hop on a plane and you were there in a few hours. No, her little sister remembers waving her off, and I've spoken to her little sister. She was about 15 years younger than Colleen, so she was a little 10-year-old waving off her sister, and she remembers waving her off on the ship, and it was such a big thing, and she didn't then see her for 6 years. Imagine that. And, you know, there weren't any FaceTime videos or anything like that. So in her first 3 years in India, Colleen really threw herself into life there, and she spent the first 3 years learning the Tamil language. She was actually a warden in a girls' hostel for 5 years, I believe, at the beginning of her time there, and she developed very quickly a really big heart for the poor girls there, whose only prospect in life was likely to be a likely miserable arranged marriage. So what did Colleen do? She did something she knew very well a lot about. She organised a girls' rally, a girls' club, a big girls' rally. And she also, something that she was very good at was sewing. So she had brought with her on the ship a sewing machine, and she had a rented garage. She cleared it up and put the sewing machine in the middle of it and taught a girl how to sew. So Colleen said, I started the ministry of CMCT aware that people in desperate need of the Lord were all around us, and desirous that each day hundreds of people could come under the sound of the gospel through all our ministries. So 60 plus years later, this is still happening.
So CMC today has grown from that sort of humble beginning to the point where they feed over 4,000 people each day. There are 1,600 sponsored children that they care for, and it provides paid employment to 350 staff in this supportive Christian environment. And all the staff are Indian nationals, which is very important now, especially with all the difficulties of overseas organisations. But Colleen is now the only non-Indian person there, and she's probably more Indian than not, having lived there for 60 years. We saw this is the CMCT vision statement, lives transformed in India through the love of Christ. And we saw this played out over and over while we were there. The gospel is so central to all that they do. And God has brought so many people to salvation through the work of CMCT, including a lot of the present staff. Colleen is now 86 years old. This was her birthday when we were there in February. Her health is very fragile. She had a stroke at the start of the year, and she's mostly bedridden now, so she doesn't have anything much to do with the day-to-day running of CMCT. She's very well cared for and deeply loved, but a lot of people, this would be a concern because she built this, God built this ministry using her, but now there is this wonderful team of local Indians who have taken over the leadership of CMCT. We were so impressed with their dedication and hard work and godliness. And this is the leadership team. The day after we arrived, they had this big training day, and you can see us standing at the back looking a bit jet lagged. But it was a great chance to sort of meet everybody and hear some of the vision that they have and the things that they're doing. There's also an international board that helps provide some oversight and guidance as well for CMCT as it moves forward. Now, you can sort of categorise what CMCT does into about 18 different ministries, and they focus on things like education, health, rehabilitation, poverty, disaster relief, and job creation. Don't worry if you can't read all those. And they're all accompanied by Bible teaching, and the gospel is clearly proclaimed through words as well as through their actions in caring for people. As Aaron, who's the director of programs, says, when you help people at the point of need, there's a wide open door for the gospel. They practice what they preach. Every day at the CMCT headquarters starts with a 1-hour chapel service. So they have a time of singing and praying, and they always have a good message from the Bible as well. We're only going to talk about 6 or so of the CMCT ministries today. We do have this nice booklet. If anyone's interested in learning more about it, this has got a bit more information on all the stuff that they do. So you're welcome to grab one of those afterwards if you're interested in learning more.
So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is the Haven of Hope Handicraft Centre. So this is what one sewing machine in a garage is today. It's 70 ladies who go through an 18-month training scheme. These are ladies from often very tragic and difficult backgrounds, and they are taught how to sew. They're taught machine sewing, hand sewing, cutting, embroidery, cross stitch. I can't sew, so it's a mystery to me, but they have such amazing workmanship, and you can see it in the hall out the back afterwards. Part of what we do, and not a big part, but it's a distinctive feature of CMCT, is that we carry with us some of the handicrafts that these ladies make, which is a way that we can help by all the money from those sales goes straight back into India. It provides training and employment for these ladies. There are heaps of designs and, as I mentioned, quality workmanship. There are also handicrafts taught and used as a way of giving employment in a couple of outlying places. There's a leprosy village and some other small handicraft projects. So it's quite a big thing in India, these ladies doing handicrafts. Another thing is the community projects. Now, this rather dismal long street of identical looking blocks of apartments is just, you can't probably tell from the picture, but that's just one street of many streets. And I think there's another slide that will show you from above. See the blue circle there? That is where that photo was taken. So it's a whole kind of, and this is what's called a resettlement area. It's where the government and the local government have built these very, very basic concrete block houses up to 8 stories high. And they house thousands of families, one family per room. And this is where the families from the slums were moved to. So they do have the advantage of not actually collapsing in the rain or the flooding of the river, but there's not a lot else going for them. They don't have running water, and you couldn't call them apartments. It's just a one bare concrete room. So it's pretty basic. And this is one of the settings for one of the child development projects that they have. And they have, I think, how many do we think? About 8 child development projects, but one of them is set in this particular place we visited. What it is an after-school program that's 5 days a week for kids who have been chosen from the neediest families. They're given a healthy snack when they arrive. They're helped with their homework. They go through a Christian curriculum, and they sing songs and have Bible stories, and all this in the setting of a government that's hostile to Christian things, but they're doing it. It's amazing. They're singing songs, they're doing memory verses, and then before they go home at the end of each day, they get fed a nutritious meal from as part of the child development project. So we visited several of these. This is actually from a different one. The kids are happy, they're well looked after, they're being fed spiritually and physically. We love seeing the smiling faces and the bright eyes. There are also similar programs in these sort of communities for the elderly. And these are older people, most often ladies, who would slip through the cracks if they weren't, they're chosen from the neediest and the poorest of the poor. They don't have family that should look after them, which is how it normally should work. And this way, they get, it's not just a drop-in thing, it's 5 days a week, and they're coming along to a program where they're fed a really nutritious meal. This is actually a picture of a lady going through a Bible curriculum with them. They go through a curriculum. They also sing songs and have memory verses. And it's just very gospel steeped and focused. They have similar projects, elder care projects in the leprosy villages and working with HIV people as well.
Another big part of the ministry is the medical side of it. They've got a building that they operate from, and one whole floor of that is dedicated to medical stuff, and it's very well equipped. Actually, they've got X-rays, dental, eye surgery, physiotherapy, lots of things there. They see about 150 patients each day, and they provide free care to those who need it. They've got 2 full-time doctors and 25 part-time, a lot of specialists in different areas. They do eye surgery. They also operate a number of regular remote clinics and what they call medical camps, where they go to an area and see a whole lot of people all in one go. That baby was born the day we were there. They would love to, at the moment the hospital has 16 beds. One thing they would love to do is expand it to about 50 beds. It would allow them to do a lot more, but that's proving, well, they're praying for space and finances and everything for that. In India, education is incredibly important. It's a way of escaping poverty. Colleen began a small school very early on to help children that were otherwise going to end up just in manual labouring jobs, from as young as 10 years old, and they would be paid a pittance, less than a New Zealand dollar a day for that. So education's a way of getting away from that. This school gradually kept outgrowing the space available until now. They have their own school. It's a lovely building. It's a wee way from their headquarters, and it has 1,400 pupils there, and they're all from poor backgrounds. It's a free education, and they provide a good lunch for them each day. That sometimes is the only meal they may get. There's also a technical training institute which is aimed at young men, I suppose, who are not very academic, but they want to learn practical skills. So that's another ministry they have. They give them the opportunity to learn a trade. In 2004, the Boxing Day tsunami that impacted that whole area was the worst natural disaster of this century. And it wiped out all the fishing villages along the coast of India there. So CMCT were allocated one village called Chinnakupam to work with. So they started off by buying new boats for them, and with the help of a whole lot of volunteers from overseas, they built 140 new houses there because the whole village was wiped out. They built it a bit further back from the sea this time, so it should be okay if there's another tsunami. The really amazing thing with this is, this was 20 years ago this was built. CMCT is still heavily involved with this village. They actually have a full-time pastor based there in a church. So this village that would have been entirely Hindu before the tsunami now has a large proportion of Christians there, and they're also reaching out to the surrounding villages.
The last thing we're going to talk about today is the sponsorship program. I'm not sure actually if there's anyone here who sponsors a child through CMCT, but if you are here, then thank you very much. This is one of the things that's really the backbone of the whole ministry. Through sponsorship of children, we are able in New Zealand to make a tangible difference in a child's life. Again, the children are chosen. These are the ladies of the sponsorship department that we just loved meeting and getting to know. And the most touching thing about talking to them was how quickly we realised that they know all the kids who are sponsored. They know their names, their family situation, and they know the names of their sponsors in New Zealand or the UK or wherever the sponsors are. So they're very, very much involved in the children's lives. They help the kids to write the letters, and so you can have a pen pal relationship with one of these kids if you want to. The cost is $60 a month, 60 New Zealand dollars a month, and this covers their entire education, including uniform and books and any medical costs. It reduces the burden on the parents, and they do normally come from a one-parent home, or maybe they're being brought up by grandma. There's also a spiritual side to this, through CMCT meetings and outings and teaching. These kids hear about Jesus, and they get a real hand up. As Jake mentioned, a good education is so important in India, and these families wouldn't be able to afford it without sponsorship for these children. There are about 1,600 children sponsored, and there are always, of course, more waiting. When we were in India, we met Nityasri, who our daughter That's why I look like that in the photo. Just to meet her and see the difference that's been made in her life. Sorry about that. So anyway, we have the, she's actually just finished school now. This is her last year. We met her in February, and the new school year has just begun. We haven't actually heard, but she was hoping to get into nursing school, so that would be amazing. We're looking forward to hearing. We have the short bios and photos of a few children with us, so if anyone is in a financial position to be able to choose a child to help in this really special way, or if you want more information, please talk to us afterwards. As mentioned, the sponsorship team have close connections with all the children and their families, and every cent of the sponsorship money goes to India, and a dollar goes a lot further in India than in New Zealand. Sorry about that, gosh. I did that the first time. This is, we're now 5 months into this job, and that's what I did the first time. My daughter wasn't sitting there, but I haven't done it since, so sorry, Anna.
Right, well, that's us all done now. We do send out, there's a monthly email newsletter we do, so if you want to if you're interested in seeing, what God has basically done with this Colleen giving her life to him, he's taken that and multiplied it so much into this amazing ministry now. So it's easy to sign up. There's from the New Zealand website, or we can take your name and details. We'd love you to pray for CMCT. We'd love you to pray for Colleen now, for comfort and for her family there as they adjust. She's never married, but she ended up adopting nearly 20 girls over her time there, so she has this amazing family around her, and but of course this is a hard adjustment for them to make now as she is approaching the end of her life. I'd love you to pray for the hospital expansion, for the leadership team there as they take this burden entirely on themselves, for us as we try and connect with churches and bring in a message of encouragement from India. And we're always praying for more sponsors, because that is a great way for people to directly help that work. So if anyone's got any questions now, we'd love to answer them, or feel free to come and talk to us afterwards. We're going to be hanging around. Thank you again for having us.
Are there any questions that people have?